Welcome to the space where creators have aligned a positive and intellectual collab of open minds for sharing and learning from one another. It's a vibe. ReadswithRosa podcast on the mic. Subscribe, educator spitting bars. I guess you didn't know I'm multifaceted and humble, checking off life goals. The classroom is my comfort zone where I plant and sow seeds of knowledge, compassion, empathy, and hope. Reading is the key to unlocking your potential. Countless benefits, including cognitive and mental. Regardless of the genre, books are highly influential. Go get yours, I'll get mine. Making strides, monumental. And rock with me and get down to this new jam. With my friends, I had a very simple plan. Educate the masses through books and life lessons. It's the grand slam. I'm out. Tala falava, kia ora, and welcome to the Reads with Rosa podcast. If you can't tell already, fam, I am so excited to introduce today's guest. She is a mana wahine of Ngapuhi, Samoan, and German descent, and she hails from Tamaki Makaurau in Aotearoa. She is a versatile and innovative multimedia artist. Writing, music, directing, producing, she's an absolute all-rounder. She's a Fulbright scholar, New Zealand Art Laureate, and creator of the cult Maori cartoon Aroha Bridge. Across all mediums, she consistently strives to prioritize community collaboration, oceanic narratives, wahine, LGBTQIA plus expression, and underground creatives of color. It is my honor to welcome to the show Coco Solid. Woo-hoo! Woohoo! I really do need to invest. I need to invest in a I keep saying I need to invest in a audience button or something, but I never do. Welcome, sis. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you for having me.
How are you? How are things in your part of the world over there in Aotearoa?
Pretty good. I mean, we've just come out of a really apocalyptic summer with, floods and storms and other hardships. And it was pretty bleak. And just in recent weeks, like the sun has decided to try to kind of make a comeback, and people are back out on the streets and
Yeah.
all collaborating and seem to be kind of rebooting and trying again. So it's actually kind of a cool vibe at the moment, but pretty wacky start to the year, pretty harsh. But yeah, I'm having a good time in my community. Everybody's reactivating and getting into some pretty big kaupapa and challenges.
Is there much difference between Coco and Jessica?
Not really.
Not really.
Not
Just
really.
like your artist name, and then
Yeah. I've been Coco for so long that I think that line was blurred a long time ago. And I think Jessica is really for my family and for the governments and for more formal things,
Right.
and people maybe who have known me like pre this kind of big expenditure era, but I'd say big proportion of my life now it's very coco-centric, and that's really seeped into my bones.
Nice. Were you a reader when you were growing up, or is it just when you were an adult, kind of like, oh?
No, I was a huge reader growing up. I'm really riding on the coattails of the hard work that I did as a young person because as a reader now, I'm not a very up-to-date fanatical reader. I am a really serendipitous reader where I'll read something if it kind of really speaks to me or was kind of thrown randomly into my hands, or I'm really just bewitched by it for a weird reason. I'm not a disciplined reader at all now, but when I was a kid and a teenager, wow, like I just read everything. I soaked up everything, and I was reading dictionaries. I was reading stuff in other languages I didn't even understand. And really deeply impacted, I think, a lot of stuff. My love of language, and I think just the way that I'm always really curious about other contexts and environments, and I want to kind of like see behind I got into scholarship, and I kind of, even if I didn't understand it, I would just trust that I would work it out later. Mm,
As you do, and there's nothing wrong with that.
mm.
You know, where does the name Coco come from? Was it something you just created out of the blue, or is it you really did your research? You were like, I need a name that is going to be like, this is it. We're
I
not
didn't,
changing it.
yeah. My friend named me Coco Solid. My friend Melanie Tangaire Baldwin named me when we were like, 19 and 20.
Mm,
And it just stuck. It's just stuck with me over the years. And it kind of like it just really suited me back then.
mm.
And it still suits me now. I still am really like, I think I really embody that name.
In terms of because as an artist or creative, you are such an all-rounder, and I wondered about music and writing, your love for music and writing stories, which came first?
Definitely writing stories. I think
Mm,
I kind of got into writing music, um, not as a distraction, but it was kind of like an offshoot of the
mm,
real writing that I wanted to do. And I found it a lot less pressure. Like I thought it was kind of
mm,
a bit more frivolous and fun.
mm,
But it ended up turning into a major discipline and medium and focus of mine. But I always, in the back of my mind, was like, this isn't really what I want to be using my love of, you know, uh, I guess language for exclusively. Like always knew I wanted to get back into literature because I think that was always my first love. Was yeah, essays and poetry and writing in the literary kind of way. It felt like,
mm,
even though this was my first book, it felt like it was really like coming home to what I truly wanted to be doing. And having said that, like I'm in too deep with the other mediums now, and they are
mm.
very much a part of how I work and what I do. So it's really a truly multidisciplinary mixed bag, and I'm loyal, and uh, yeah, I take everything pretty seriously, but definitely writing stories was the first.
Mm. Were you in terms of multidisciplinary work, were you picking up different disciplines uh, as over the years, or did you actually study film and study music? Did you go to
Mm,
university to study that, or is it just something that
mm.
gradually it evolves? Your craft evolves over the years.
Yeah, I'd say it feels pretty self-taught, with music. That was more just something I kind of fell into.
Mm,
Um, in terms of actually developing my storytelling in the literary world, that's a mixed bag actually, because I went to broadcasting school as a teenager.
mm. Wow.
Went to Ōtautahi in Christchurch pretty much just to kinda like, I was a bit of a rebel. I just wanted to move out of home and act
You're like,
fun,
I'm getting out of Auckland.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like 17 and I was like at broadcasting school. I was one of the like youngest people in my class. And yeah, I did get this kind of formal training, I think, in terms of screen, but there were so many blind spots and institutional problems that the training, I kind of was like, that was an experience, but I don't know if that really informed a lot in terms of my voice.
Mm,
Was something I had to transcend in a way, and that's a pattern because same thing happened when I was much older, like in my 30s, kind of doing my creative writing masters. There was more to see, like if my voice, just to hone my editorial kind of skills and just to get an insight into that world and dedicate myself to that craft for a while. And that was fraught with problems, like
mm,
I definitely was like, didn't really fit into that mold. Um,
mm.
And so I've had like tussles in terms of formally honing my voice, but the best stuff that I really did for my craft, I think, was all DIY. It was all kind of like, yeah, through music, through lyricism, through zines and comics and kind of self-publishing stuff and yeah, like blogging and social media. I always say Twitter was one of the best things that ever happened for my kind of my practice. I got pretty tight on there. So I'm a bit of a quilt, I think, like a mashup. I can't say it was all completely off the dome because I did make ventures into more formal channels, and underground channels. So they've always been kind of like something I've done at the same time.
In reflection on that, in terms of longevity and staying active and being content, in the various spaces that you work at, like how have you managed to do that through your career? I don't know if through your journey as a creative and artist.
How have I managed to stay happy through that kind of timeline?
How have you and just stay, I don't want to say like stay in the game, but I guess stay
Uh,
active in spaces where you're like, this is me, this is I'm here,
yeah. That's a good question. If it's kind of framing it as how have I stayed happy, I'd say the unfortunate answer is haven't. It's been like a real roller coaster, and it has really been more about resilience than it satisfying me. I'm very open about the fact that I think I'm not put off by dissatisfaction either. I think that my artistic temperament is really all about the kind of pursuit of, I guess, revolution and change and looking at the bigger picture and the collective consciousness that I'm working in. But I had an interview the other night with Stacey Morrison with the Auckland Women's Centre. And I gave a very long-winded answer to a similar question she posed me. And then she was just like, "Oh, so you're tough." And I was like,
I can just hear her voice
"Yeah."
as well.
She's like, "Oh, so you're really, really tough." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just tough. That's just the way I'm put together, I think I do have to laugh at a lot of the kind of people and systems and naysayers that I have kind of outlasted and outrun. Because I don't know, I think that those things really, I learn from them and they ground and motivate me and inform me to kind of be a more determined artist. But I think there's a big difference between people who just want to kind of stay in the racket and people who are there for a deeper purpose, Definitely here for, I think, a mixture of reasons. And a lot of them are spiritual. A lot of them are, it's more than a livelihood for me. It's like I really can't imagine myself working outside the toolkit of creativity. It permeates everything we do anyway.
Oh, in your household growing up, in terms of language, were you hearing both Maori, like Te Reo and Samoan language, or was it like a like a
Yeah.
hodgepodge of along with English? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I was definitely hearing, yeah, everything. I was hearing shards and downloads and little pieces of Maori. My grandfather lived with us when I was young as well for a few years, and he was Maori, and that was kind of like really normalized. And in terms of Samoan, that was like a bit less accessible because there was a lot of kind of, I think, stuff tied up with intergenerational stuff on both sides, actually, if I'm being honest. It's like harder to access, but I was pretty determined to kind of try and gain as much access for myself independently and collaboratively with my family. So we're in a really kind of exciting place, actually. I think like my nephews and the younger generation have like some really cool systems to their languages and their tupuna.
You know, I want to talk about how to loiter in a turfwall. Actually, we
Yeah,
bought the audiobook, but way back. But
love that.
and we'll get to that. We'll get to this whole thing I have with
Mm,
audiobooks, and I have questions for you about that. But I do want
sure.
to talk about this book, man. It's so people have said it's a lucid, genre bending, autobiographical work of fiction that takes the reader into the lives of three friends living in Tamaki Makaurau in Auckland.
Mhm.
They're trying to navigate through life and its issues, and they're determined not to let gentrification destroy their community. Now, so I say all that to say, when you were doing press and media, did anyone ever ask you what beefing meant?
No, no, I think,
I love it. Eh? I was
yeah,
just like, that's in the synopsis. That is so the bomb.
yeah, well, I kinda live in a bubble where I assume we've all got the same vernacular, and then I find out sometimes the hard way, people don't know what I'm talking about. But, no, I never got drilled about beefing, but I think
I
that's
had to
because
know.
I'm just like I'd probably be like, "Get with the program."
Yeah. I needed that was the first thing. I was like, let me just get this off my chest. I need to know. But
Mhm,
tell us about this because I read that you are a Fulbright scholar and you wrote this during your time you were in Hawaii.
mhm.
Um, could you share the beginning of the story?
Yeah, well, I had just kind of I'd been living on Karangahape Road pretty much as like the final blows of that gentrification were happening, and that
Mm,
was the same time that my grandmother was kind of being taken into care. She was in the Ponsonby, Grayland area,
uh,
and so that was a really dense time that I was kind of surviving it, but I had never really connected it to my artistic life. And then when I got awarded the scholarship, I kind of drafted that I wanted to do some research about it and turn it into, a body of work. And then when I got to Hawaii and I wanted to start researching what gentrification looks like in Pacific cities, and it was relevant in Hawaii where I was studying, and it
mm,
was relevant from Aotearoa where I'd just come from, and lots of conversations. When I was flying home, I went to Samoa and stayed with family, and they were talking about the kind of huge changes in Apia, all the land kind of getting developed. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just everywhere, and this is affecting the Pacific worldwide. And it's a very specific kind of thing that impacts our people.
mm,
And so I guess I just connected the dots. And
mm,
I was like, "Oh, okay." I guess I was really inspired. I've always have been inspired by my friendships
mm,
and the sisterhood. I take that pretty to heart, like my relationship with my actual sisters as well. So I kind of was like, I'd love to see girls, our kind of girls in that medium a bit more and expose people to how we love each other, how we protect each other, how we fight, how we kind of really walk that intense line with platonic love.
mm,
And yeah, I guess I just wanted to hear my vernacular um, in a literary work without it being kind of otherized or demonized or reduced to something like quite like unrealistic or racist.
mm,
I wanted to show really like I think how clever we are and how we just get completely underestimated and misread and reduced
mm,
in like white canon and by I think audiences a lot that don't really see that side of us, that really neurotic side as well. That really
mm.
I think all of the girls in the book are they're in their head a lot, and I think we get pathologized in canon as like not being like that, where it's all about kind of the trauma and the body and the heart. And I was like, yeah, those things are true,
Mm,
but I wanted to like hear more nerdery, and I wanted to hear like what that looked like depict that at a street level as well, and also
mm,
just show what gentrification looks like in real time.
mm. For me, I had to get it's not that I don't like reading books, I just as soon as I found out that you were narrating so I love audiobooks, I'm such an advocate for audiobooks, and I wish that more Maori and Pasifika authors would, you know, have audiobook versions of their stories because I want to hear the humor. I want to hear like in this case the slang and the street talk. And as soon as
Mm,
like I will only buy an audiobook if it's the author that is narrating the story, they're reading it because there've
that's
been
a
other
cool rule.
cases. Yeah, well, because honestly, there've been other cases where I've absolutely loved the book that I've read, and I'm like, yo, I'm gonna buy the audiobook. Then I buy the
Mm.
audiobook and I'm like, what is this British accent? This is not
What
happening,
were they
fam.
thinking? Or
What is
like
going on here?
when they get a really wahine centric book and
Yeah.
then they get a man to like
I
narrate it,
know,
it's like, girl, what were you
I'm like,
thinking?
exactly.
I
So when
hate
I
that. I hate that
exactly,
as
this is what I
well.
tell people. So when I found out that you were actually reading it, I was like, hey, what? Really? Okay, right. I'm
Mm,
getting the audiobook. But it was exactly that. Like I wanted to hear the language, the everyday language. And honestly, when I listen to this, I feel like I'm in the room. Like I feel like I'm in those conversations, like I'm giggling. Then I'm like, ugh,
yeah.
what was that? And then I'm so curious. Like I just loved hearing that, and I loved it even more that you read it. I was like,
Thank you.
excellent. That's what we
And
need. We need more. You
okay, and
know.
this is a bigger conversation because
Mm,
for me, this is about the fact that we're an oratory people. And the way that I've written it, I get a lot of feedback from people saying, oh, I can kind of hear your voice, and it
mm,
feels not like a literary work, it feels like a film. And it's like you can hear the atmosphere of people talking. And so I feel like the kind of oratory tradition and disposition kind of infiltrates the work, even though it's
mm.
textual. And then on top of that, I mean, you and I, like, we sound the same, right? We've got the same accent, and it's such a nuanced accent, and you don't really hear it much in
Mm,
terms of mainstream depictions, and it's certainly not in the literary um, environment. You're not
mm.
really hearing audio works. With the way that you and I are talking right now. And so probably the
Exactly.
reason why it really hit home for you was because you could hear these people because they
Yes,
sounded like you. And
absolutely.
we are not the only two people in the world that talk like this. There are like hundreds of thousands of people in the
Mm,
Pacific who kind of have this way of communicating, and it's a very not a niche thing, but to me it was about I get a lot of conversations about representation kind of like projected onto me a lot,
mm,
and that's fine, that's obvious, I'm happy to do that, but it's really rewarding when people kind of get into the deeper, more detailed versions of the representation that I hold, which I think is
mm,
like
mhm,
um Maori and Pacific City girls. Like I'm not
mm,
really um I was really like raised and educated in a very complicated city.
mm,
And that really does affect the way that you think and the way you talk. And I'm really honored in terms of the audiobook that people are like, it was so cool to hear somebody that actually sounds like me and talks like me. And it's one thing to like write write a book and a text, that kind of unpacks these characterizations and unpacks these things, but it hits different when you actually hear it because you see that I'm
Yes.
tied to that story in this whole other way.
Yes, and nowadays, which is something that is absolutely fantastic, and I love to see, and I'm so here for, is we have more books being produced, by our people for our people. But I'm also going to
Mm.
need our people to go that next step, and like you
Yeah.
said, get these stories on audio because it's just so important. Like there are just some people who will never pick up a book, and I'm talking about our people. They will never pick up a book because they'll look at it and be like, "Oh, it's overwhelming. I don't read." But to listen to a story and hear
Mm.
those voices, everything you said, I mean, I was just like, yes, yes. Now I'm gonna need everyone else to make an audiobook for the. It's just so important. Like,
And I think it's because we've been culturally intimidated and muscled
mm,
out of feeling like we were allowed to not only consume literature, but we are not allowed to produce it on our terms. So I'm
mm,
really proud to be contributing to debunking that idea.
mm,
And also, like the way that it, I've had feedback from people in the neurodivergent community who are like, "Thank you so much for doing an audiobook."
yes,
Like, I can't handle it. Like I have
yeah,
ADHD or I have kind
mm,
of like vision problems. Like it was amazing to be able to tap into this book that everyone was talking about. I was like, it's so much more important than people think to be able to like put your
absolutely.
literary works in audiobooks. And I'm just really grateful that we do, that I am a musician and I do a lot of kind
Mm,
of voice work and stuff like that, that making and creating an audiobook with my partner, Tukato Brown, who produced it,
mm.
wasn't a big deal. It was a real challenge. It was like a whole like
A whole
eye-watering week
situation.
where I just couldn't kind of like find my flow with it. It
Right.
was hard, to kind of like, but it was also so rewarding because that's the thing with creative control. It's
Mm,
like you get more of a say and you get more agency and editorial power, but more work, more
mm,
responsibility. And you are
right.
like, if the audiobook kind of sucks, well, that's on me. So I had to really like put my whole self into that aspect of it. But yeah, I've loved the feedback to it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, because I know with Audible, I know that it was through Penguin Random House that you produced the audio, which I thought was great. Because I know with
Mhm.
Audible, it's a whole like situation. I've read like they have all these real specific criteria in terms of the sound of your voice, and it's just so complex and difficult. And I'm like, no wonder people don't want to create like do audiobooks.
Yeah.
It's because it's almost like they have all these specifications, and it's like, yo, you're basically just saying don't bother, right? So it's just,
It's strict. Yeah, it's very
yeah.
strict. And,
So
we had
you're
to
awesome.
really
I'm glad you guys did it. Like,
it was a battle. It was a
yeah,
battle, and that's why the audiobook didn't come out for a little while, once it was kinda out on the shelves. It's just, I
yeah.
think, like a week or 2 delayed because of stuff like that, but we kept on kind of fighting to meet those regulations, and man, when I saw it on my Audible app, I was just like, "Yeah, I
Yes.
did it.
Yeah.
It's awesome."
Yeah, like I waited. Like I'm not gonna lie, I was just excited to read the book, but I was like, wait, what? I saw the notice, audiobook coming. I was like, okay, we're good. I'm waiting for the audiobook because I had read reviews already on the
Yeah.
book, and I was like, oh nah, I gotta hear this. Like I need to like listen to this. I need to hear the voices of the characters, uh, and hear the story develop. So yeah,
Oh,
again,
bless
I
you.
can't give you enough flowers, man. Seriously.
Yes, thank you.
But I wanted to talk about, so the characters, which I was super curious about. So there's Q,
Mm.
there's Rosina, there's Tehoya, and then the fictional author academic, uh, Piopi Ruta Chris. And I was wondering about the characters. Like, are they are there parts of you in those characters, or when you're writing, like, are you thinking about people that you know? Or do
Mm,
each of these characters make a statement which is like based on something that you're passionate about? Like, yeah, the
mm.
characters, amazing, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. They are each kind of like a Frankenstein of like people I've loved and had close to me over like my whole
Mm,
life. They're kind of each person, I think, yeah, is comprised of like several people. And I feel like when someone close to me can sense one character is informed by them, they're usually right, you know. And having said that, the way that I kind of wrote them was informed very much by my own tendencies. Everybody has a major kind of piece of me smeared across that story, you know. And
mm,
the academic Pio to Chris, you know, I
mm,
have such a respect for people who work in that space and the kind of work that they do. So it's very much a fantasy of being
mm.
that kind of writer. And I didn't, you know, have to do all of the painful footnotes and pay the student fees. I could just kind of cosplay. But yeah, in terms of the key friends, you know, like that's really, I think, a love letter to many sisterhoods that I've experienced and parts of me, like from different timelines
Mm,
that I've kind of left behind, but I still will carry with me. And the fact that it's from, I think, essentially a much younger time in my life, but that time of my life is still crystal clear. I think a lot of writers, they tap into not a heyday of sorts, but there's always kind of the soil is most fertile in a particular time frame in their life. And it's
mm,
really not hard for me to tap into that chaos of coming of age as an
mm,
artist and trying to get growing and trying to survive and learning about injustice while it was happening to me and not having the tools to kind of do anything about it. So it was like my way of kind of hacking time and giving some love and empathy to myself, but also just shouting out and honoring those really deep, intense friendships that I think
mm,
so many women and femmes have.
mm. What about the names? How did you decide the names of the key characters in the text in the book?
Mm. Uh, I had loved the name Te Hoia for years, for decades. And, you know, that was the name of my late daughter. And so we had like a reverse situation where a lot of people kind of name a character after their daughter, but I had named, you know, our daughter after this character that I'd already written.
Mm,
So the fact that it kind of lives on in the book is really surreal and very strange, but
mm,
very beautiful. That's like a name, you know, kind of big where I'm from. Um,
mm,
yeah, did a lot of kind of. It's such a rich name, Te Hui. I mean, I won't get into it, but yeah, that was long ago selected. And Q, I think, again, is like a Frankenstein of a thousand friends
mm.
I've had who've like shortened or like kind of had, even myself, like them better known by their kind of stage name or their fake name. So, um, yeah, just those kind of iconic pals of mine that kind of really just take their identity in their own hands. And they're like,
Mm,
you're going to call me this. And I think Rosina's special. That was the name of my great aunt, Rosina, my grandmother's
mm,
sister, who was a huge support system for me and always encouraged me to write when I was a little girl. And yeah, she's a queer ancestor who I
mm,
feel like never was able to really embrace that part of her life publicly. And so by kind of having her in a book like this, I feel like, yeah, I kind of get to honor her and that part of her life in that way. So it's, yeah, it's very much names are important. very important.
Absolutely. I was wondering about the reaction or feedback from your friends and family once the book dropped.
Oh, that was just so fun. I was terrified the nights leading up to the book being out. I thought my family were going to hate me. Everyone's going to hate me. Very, 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 very neurotic. But yeah, I just got a text from my mum saying that she loved it. She thought it was amazing.
Oh.
And I was good after that.
Yeah.
No, like, I think after that I was fine. I didn't really care. And I think a lot of my elders were kind of like, it's good. I don't understand, but also, so amazing. And then I had for me, it's more about people who really saw themselves in it. And I got to honor the area that, my father's side kind of gentrification really hurt the family a lot. Just in a nostalgic kind of sentimental way as well as like a literal way. So it was cool to just I think just put our stake in the sand a bit and just tell a story I think is very specific to an Auckland experience. Yeah. My community just ate it up. The girlies loved it, and that's all that matters to me.
Can we expect the film? I mean, you can drop the news here. Is there a movie?
I've had a couple of offers, but I don't think it's the right time. I think it has to have a life as a book and as a text. Yeah. People might think I'm crazy, but I'm just like, nah, not yet. And yeah, like I said the other night, I feel like sometimes you just got to let things live on in people's minds. Yeah, it's like leave things up to them. These girls look like what is in your head, and I don't want to ruin that.
Great answer. So you've received, you've been recognized for your work, you've received accolades, and I was wondering, throughout the years, getting recognition, what has been a moment, a memorable moment, if any, across the disciplines?
I've had so many milestones and highlights. It's genuinely hard to say. And they probably wouldn't be the things that people expect. People probably want me to go for the big kind of trophy institutional cosign moments and the kind of the things that people associate with being a successful artist, but those aren't necessarily the big milestones for me. Having said that, I love a flex if it comes up. I love a surprise and to really just show people, especially kind of underground artists with a stubborn kind of independent streak who maybe kind of get robbed by mainstream artists but kind of stand their ground and do things their own way. I really I guess, showing people that you can really attain a certain level and work in ways that you've always dreamed of and not have to make those more moral compromises. To me, that's that's massive. And whenever I feel slighted or kind of frustrated that me or work isn't getting a particular kind of recognition, that's when I know I've played myself. That's when I'm like, oh, girl, stop buying into that. It's not even about that. And I'm quickly returned to the source, and the reason why I do this. And it's a much deeper reason. It's so that I can have experiences like this, and I can connect with readers and people who resonate with my work in a much deeper, aligned way. Getting accolades from people who are not from your world, you have to make a lot of compromises to be really validated in that way. And sometimes I think when I'm getting too validated in those spaces, I have to really question if what I'm doing is really, I must be doing something wrong. So I'm a bit of a, I like to create a certain kind of critique and friction, not just in the work, but how the work sits in the bigger picture.
Is that what Kuini Qontrol is built on? Kuini Qontrol is the online project. You edit that. So is that part of what you're talking about? The work you do with that, or?
Yeah, definitely. That's like the independent record label. That's like the blog that just talks about stuff that where I feel like I can't be bothered finding a mainstream home for it. It's just really, like another alter ego and name that you can put to a certain part of my practice, which is really fiercely advocating for independence and sovereignty for artists and their narratives, especially in Oceania.
I want to ask this question about the literary world. As a published author, what have your experiences been thus far? Was it just this uphill battle, like having a sense of belonging and feeling like I'm really a part of this? I'm included, not just because you tick a box, but you know what? I walk into this room and you know what? I do belong here. I am a part of this. I have every right to be here.
Yeah.
No, not.
I think I feel like I have a right to move in those spaces. But I'm just so disappointed often in terms of what those spaces, how they reciprocate and how they support and hold an artist like me and the intentions that I have. And I guess, the stuff that is inferred when I'm kind of in a conversation, it's really the framework is really dependent on centering whiteness a lot. And I think it really supports and celebrates work that needs whiteness in order to function. And I've put so much labor into trying to separate my voice and my community from that codependence, and to really create a lane and a context of my own. But I often feel like I'm really not misunderstood. I'm willfully misunderstood. I'm conveniently in order to understand me, they would have to really reevaluate how the whole thing is set up, and they can't afford to do that. So it's just easier to exclude creators like me. And so I get it. And I have such a amazing network, I think, of artists and thinkers who don't buy into that paradigm as well. Or when we do kind of participate in it, it's very strategic. It's for the kind of it's more for the movement than for the collaboration with that world. That world is very insidious. It's very loaded. You have to really, a lot of people really kind of uphold some really problematic, some real problematic stuff. It's not like, it's not as glamorous as gatekeepers. I'll say it's more like the security guard at a Wiggles concert, It's not that's what I think of those people. Yeah.
And so building community, and like you've mentioned, your connections and, the people that you networking with, at the grassroots level, at the underground level. I mean, how important is that to keep uplifting one another, supporting, going out, giving flowers where it's deserved. I mean, it must be nice to be able to reach out to, these spaces and communities where you don't have to meet, the typical criteria.
I mean, independence and creating your own world, and not being in a vacuum. I'm always testing my work and pushing myself out of my comfort zone. But at the same time, I'm able to do that because I do create a community and context for myself where I don't have to compromise and I fit in, and people think and sound like me, and we validate each other's narratives and stories and histories. And, I think if you have that kind of climate that you're part of, and you're part of a bigger fabric, then you're just trying to have people feel like they're not going insane, which is, I love that feeling. I love giving that feeling to other people. I love feeling myself, even sometimes just saying to someone, yeah, you're getting gaslit. Like, it's not your imagination, we live
It's
in a
real.
colony. It's
Yeah.
real. Or like, we live in a patriarchy. It's real. And just being able to validate people and be validated myself, that's something only a real community can do. And in order to create something like that, takes a lot of work and trust and just investment. But what it does is it enriches the work and the life, and it creates like a high coping collective. And that's what I'm working towards all the time. I want to see a healthier collective. I want to be a part of something, not just buy into the cult of the individual. That shit's boring.
Feke Fortress, you and your partner Tokera Brown built a place for artists, Maori, Pasifika, artists from marginalized communities. What is the story of Feke Fortress? Is that an extension of Kuini Qontrol, or is that just providing another space for, recognizing people that are not getting their flowers but are out there like working hard?
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. It's kind of like a sibling, like the physical embodiment of the principles of Kuini Qontrol. It's kind of named after a big fictional world that Tokoro created through a series of exhibitions and like concerts and some apparel. But the Feke is just such a rich figure in so many like of our histories, across the Pacific and in like Maori, Samoan, Rarotongan culture, all of the motu kind of have their relationship with it, and the kind of tentacles and the strands that we kind of use to weave together our community. I mean, but that's just the story that's formed recently. We kind of just were winging it when we named it that. Fortress being that it was going to be a protected, safe space. It was going to prioritize cultural, I guess, competency, and people wouldn't have to make as many code switching compromises as they would in other community and gallery spaces. And it's really just to, have our people working together or, on their own, just in a way that we don't see very often, and create a resource that people can actually use. I think in these times it can be so isolating and lonely. Spaces have a whole new value now, and congregating and being together has a whole new value.
Yeah, as someone who lives overseas and follow the Feke Fortress IG account, like I appreciate the updates. I mean, I'm learning. I'm seeing artists. I'm seeing people that and hearing stories of people that I've never, probably never would have known had I not followed you because of your work as an author and writer. and then of course Feke Fortress. So I do appreciate, as someone living overseas, I know recently you've been dropping like little snippets of new artists that you've taken on board. I think it's fantastic, and I hope
and they're all like thank you. First of all, thank you. And we have a love for the underground, We are like, I'll always have my roots, I think, in lesser known kaupapa and stuff that struggles to find a mainstream, nationhood friendly kind of home in terms of the collective narrative. Just am an underground arts girly, I think, at the end of the day. And I kind of attract that kind of practitioner still. So I'm very lucky, but also that's a big passion of mine. And these people are not necessarily enmeshed and discovered or tied to the space. These are like sovereign practitioners who are a planet unto themselves, with or without us, greatness was inevitable. But I just want to create, I guess, like a network in which people know that it's a bit deeper than just colleagues, or just like associates, that it's actually like, no, let's get into some really cool holistic values in terms of how we support each other. It's deeper for us. We have to actually really have each other's back, I think, in this day and age. And it's like an extension of my art practice for sure, but it's also like an extension of our spiritual practice too.
The Aroha Bridge series, is there any chance that will come back? I know there were 3 seasons. People loved it, so I was just wondering if
I get asked this a lot, actually. And at the moment, for some reason, it's coming up a lot. I think it's because people are like, okay, enough time has passed. Like, what's going on? It's really hard. It's a really hard conversation because to create an animation in Aotearoa with a animation team that, is multicultural and kind of values the upskilling of animators of our people and has a very much a big kaupapa. That shit is expensive and it takes a long time as well. So it's expensive, takes a long time. And there's that whole saying of like, was it cheap, fast, or good? You can only have 2 at a time. And so Aroha Bridge, I'd like to think is good because it ain't cheap and it ain't fast, And networks, Maori TV, Whakata Maori, has always kind of like had its back like that. But in terms of investing in another series, that's a really big ask. And I feel like we might explore it soon, but it's, we're kind of like really stuck in terms of that conversation, like where to go with it. But if it has, I guess, ended, like I'm so proud. I'm so proud of what it was, what it said and what it was able to do. And kind of like that's where I learnt so much of my big screenwriting lessons. Like that was my baby. That's where I was at that time. I get this kind of time capsule of some of the things that I wanted to communicate. And a lot of those kinds of ideas I've actually transcended and outgrown, but it doesn't mean that I wouldn't completely love another opportunity to show what that looks like. It's just, we ain't America, I get reminded of that. Aroha Bridge was like my big reminder that I don't make animation in America.
Because it's as you were talking about, time and then of course money, right? The money that it's how expensive it is. It just had me thinking about funding, and I mean that's just a whole nother situation, So I was just like, I mean that's just a whole nother mission. So I can imagine, the difficulties around like
funding is just like, it's a real unfortunate way of life. It kind of goes
Mm,
hand in hand with so much of like what you have to do if you want to punch at a certain level.
mm,
It's a total boner buster and the bane of, I think, our lives as artists.
mm,
And it's getting very much Squid Games at the moment, like people fighting for resources in order to make what they need to make, and also the kind of war on arts as well. You've got like the mayor of Auckland is
I
making like
know.
really targeted funding cuts to a lot of these kinds of kaupapa. And so
Mm,
it's really just like commerce and art, they're oil and water, but we need a certain level in order to exist, and you have to make a certain effort and concession in order to get your stuff, I guess,
mm,
in order to make it, in order to get it to live. And I don't have the answer to that. I'm always in kind of quandaries and funding kind of
mm,
headaches and kōrero, and it's just a
mm,
part of what we have to do. If you're ambitious, it's just the reality of what you do.
mm. How do you become better at what you do?
For me, it was just time, and
Mm,
I was always been kind of a pretty prolific artist. I'm making like a lot at a lot of different mediums and a lot of
mm,
different kind of styles, and so I feel like I've just always been a learner,
mm,
and I treat everything like a curriculum. I treat everything like a way to learn and improve, and that's my trick. It's like I'm not trying to kind of arrive or kind of get myself declared an authority on anything. I'm literally just trying to learn and evolve in my own way.
mm. Can we expect
Mm.
any music or if anything like that music-wise from you, or are you like
Oh,
that's sitting over there, that's done with? Uh, yeah.
yeah, I think it might be time to kind of get back into some musical projects. They might not necessarily be my own, but
Mm,
they could be ones that I helped to get realized.
oh, wow.
Um, and yeah, I have a couple of big screen projects that I have to kind of really see through that got majorly neglected when the book came out because the book just swallowed up my
Exciting.
life. Um, yeah, and just the gallery, like Fike Fortress, every day
Mm.
is, uh, yeah, it's crazy. It's like a train station at the moment, but everybody's like a bohemian babe. And so you have to be the kaitiaki of that. You have to hold the energy of that and guide the principles and to show manaki and
Mm.
strength to be able to create foster these kinds of communities. So yeah, I think it's gonna be really busy. It's gonna be a busy time, but maybe not a big glamorous output time. It's gonna be more of the times. It's gonna be more
Mm.
just making sure that people are healthy and making
And
sure
what
I'm
about
healthy.
you? Yes, what about yes, that's my next question
Yeah.
is how do you know when you're holding down the fort or the fortress and you're
Mm,
like doing what you do, uplifting others, and
mm,
spiritually, all of that. But how does Coco look after number one, you know?
mm. That's a good question. And it's one that, previously I probably would have struggled to answer, but I am getting really better at knowing my limitations and having my rituals and boundaries and curfews and, just basically knowing that for everything that I give externally, I have to turn around and reflect that back to myself internally. And so that's a lot of aroha, that's a lot of energy. And I
Mm,
have to believe that I deserve it when I do it, which is the hard part sometimes. It's also
mm,
really addictive to kind of like be out and exploring and giving and catalyzing and you can really get lost in that game, I think. And yeah, Tokoro, my partner, has been amazing at really helping me connect with, I think, the simple things that ground a practice as intense as mine. You do have to take that small, I guess, domestic practice, the spiritual practice, and just the framework where you are relaxed and safe and regulated after like dysregulation. You're just grounding, So I'm getting better at that, and I do take it seriously these days. So it's giving me the right amount of energy at the moment anyway. We'll see. I'm no stranger to burnout, I won't lie. But yeah, I feel like I'm finding a balance, and that's really exciting to me, that I might be able to do the things that I want to do, and I might still have plenty in my cup at the end of the day. That's the dream, I think.
I'm glad that you are, more aware and being intentional and taking care of yourself, because, you're important to the people around you and the work that you do and the communities and spaces that you're a part of. So you definitely
Mm.
cannot neglect
Thank you. I
you,
know, and I, of course,
like
you can see me cringing at that question, like, shit, like
So
my
I
weak
mean,
point, my Achilles heel, myself,
I struggle
But,
with it. So
no, I'm learning to really, yeah, we all do, and so I'm really learning to genuinely love it, because if you don't learn to love it, man, you just keep on repeating that cycle. And I'm not interested in the self-sacrificial martyrdom thing that plagues our people, that plagues artists. Like, I'm a poster girl for somebody who
Yeah.
should just be depleting herself all the time. I check all the boxes, but I really want to break that cycle. And I
Absolutely.
do. I want to, like you say, I do want to be here for a community that so often pushes me forward into those kinds of contexts and conversations. Like, if that's what it's giving, like, then I owe it to more than just myself to be healthy and participate. Yeah.
Yes, louder, louder, louder.
we
Um,
see we see so many people, like so
mm,
many precious people really get overextended
mm,
because they are a figure like that, or they are ambitious like that.
mm.
Yeah, like I say, I qualify. I qualify, and I'm aware of it, and people around me make me aware of that. So I got to be careful. It's a really good thing to kind of normalize this kind of kōrero, eh?
Absolutely. Do you have any book recommendations, or do you want to just promo your book and just say something to the audience and the
Yeah.
listeners?
Actually, I went to the Kapiti Writers Retreat, which is like a weekend of different writers giving lectures and workshops. And my workshop was phenomenal. And I had lots of amazing writers and babes just in a circle, just sharing. And we had talanoa, and we were singing and sharing. And one of the writers, Debbie Broughton, had a book, The Aniwaka Room, which she gifted me. And yeah, the cover is just like so incredible. I absolutely
Oh,
fell in love with it. It's like deadly.
wow.
And yeah, it's a collection of their poetry, but it's so dense and yet so lean and simple. And yeah, we had a big talk about, I guess, people being very obsessed about your kind of footnotes and the Eurocentric practice of how you garner your knowledge and where you get your stories from, and how if you have a spiritual practice that's you can't really explain it, or you have these downloads and relationship with your tupuna that trumps any library, and how people often don't understand that. And so, I just want to really amplify that author and their work because, just a really awesome practitioner and just a really cool puka,
Everyone that's listening, you can check the bio, How to Loiter in a Turf War by Coco Solid. I swear, you gotta buy the book. If you don't want to buy the book, definitely need to listen to the audiobook. You heard it here. Go buy it.
Yeah,
Seriously,
buy
support
it.
our Maori and Pasifika authors. Yeah.
Seriously, and thank you for supporting Māori and Pacifica authors and that being a huge focus of what you do, Like, keep doing this podcast and keep on, like, having conversations in the literary space that look different to the dry, prescribed dinosaurs that are controlling that conversation. Like, you are like, what you're doing, I think, is so accessible. It's relevant. It's pop culturally more relevant. And so I think like respect for this format and respect for the effort that you put into it.
I
It's
really
really working.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
As we begin to wrap up, I'm going to give you an opportunity just to drop some final words. But before, oh my goodness, Coco, before fangirling over here, as you know, before we wrap it up and I give you the opportunity, I just have to say that when the book dropped in May last year and I was following your work and I was just like, who is this author? Oh my goodness, she's multidisciplinary. Oh my goodness, look at all these different projects and spaces that she's in. So following all the interviews you were doing, the press and media stuff, I couldn't even believe that you were like, oh, get in touch with me next year. I mean, I was just like, oh my God. Like, I swear I shed a tear. I was like, is she for real? No. I just, I know, I need to get a grip. I do. But I just, from the bottom of my heart, I have to say, I'm humbled. Thank you so much for your kind words. Like, it's really uplifting. I'm really encouraged because, sometimes doing this podcast, sometimes you get the scene. And I understand, especially writers, super, super busy people, busy folks. So just the fact that you're like, yeah, let's do this. I was just like, oh my gosh, we're going to have a talanoa. Anyways, I say all that to say I'm humbled. I'm super grateful. And I want to wish you all the best as, on the journey 2023, as you continue to just empower and uplift the various folks that you're working with in those different spaces. Power to your community and just your people that are out there uplifting, indie folks, the underground, the people at the grassroots level, amplifying their voices, their stories, their work and art. Keep going. I'm a huge fan. Let me stop now. I know, Rosa, stop talking. But let me just hand it to you again. Stay blessed and just keep going strong, but always look after yourself. Look after yourself first. And I'll hand it over to you to wrap up the show with some final words of wisdom or some gems.
Wow. Malo lava, ngā mihi nui kia koe, Rosa. I would probably just refract and reflect that kōrero right back at you and just say, keep on finding your rongoa, your medicine that you bring to the world, which I think this is a huge part of it. And just keep using your gifts and your kind of very unique niche superpower to create more conversations and more critique. I think in a space like this, it's just so cool, like what you're doing, and people out there who kind of resonate with anything that I'm doing or anything you're doing. It's like, just do everything in your own style, in your own time, and really have that stubbornness and resilience and determination to trust in your own style and your own vibe, because it pays off. It ends up being like things manifest, things become real, and they only get realer and realer with the more kind of energy that you put towards it. So big mihi to you. Yeah, no worries. I've really enjoyed talking to you.